Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Advanced Bass Fishing, and really appreciate you guys coming by the channel and check today's video out. We're going to talk about suspended bass today. I sort of want to go and give you guys a foundational point of view on why and how bass suspend and what you can do to target those fish, how to catch them, because there's a lot to it. There's a lot of complexities behind this, so we're going to get into that, and I'm going to approach this from a non-forward facing sonar perspective. I mean, I'll get into that a little bit, but we're going to approach it more of a traditional suspended bass approach for just regular bass fishing in today's video. Also, guys, I wanted to extend a big thank you before we get started out. I really appreciate you guys putting up with it. I know you guys get tired of me hearing about all the plugs in the videos, but thank you very much for everybody out there that's taken time to subscribe to the channel and use all the links I put in each video description. If you're one of the viewers that are using those links, like my Tackle Warehouse link, you're really giving back a lot to the channel, and a big thank you from me and my family for that. Okay, now I want to leave the whole forward-facing sonar out of this, because forward-facing sonar, for the most part, does target suspended fish all the time. That's the wheelhouse for that piece of destructive technology. Is it focuses on suspended fish, whether it be loners, groups, wolf packs, whatever. I want to talk about how to approach and find and catch suspended bass from a non-live scope perspective, just using traditional two-dimensional sonar or even a flasher with that. Okay, first of all, let's talk a little bit about why bass suspend. It's one of those mysteries in fishing because there's two different things from my perspective, my theory on why bass suspend. Number one is it allows them to get away from pressure, it allows them to, get away from, people, it doesn't take any effort for them to suspend. They can suspend as easy as they can sit next to a log. So a lot of those fish that suspend are wanting to get away from noise, get away from pressure, and a lot of them are following bait fish. A lot of those fish that live suspended, they live around schools of shad. In other words, say for example, if you got a couple 3-pound bass and they've located a big school of shad swimming out in open water, these fish will follow those shad all the time. That's their game. And what they'll do, they'll live with those shad. They'll swim with them, they'll follow them. Occasionally they'll run up there and grab a shad if they're hungry, and then they sulk back down and start following the school again. And they'll just do that their whole lives. But it's like they're following the grocery store, and that's just what they do. That's 1%, or that's a percentage of the bass population that does that. So in terms of targeting those fish with traditional fishing techniques, a couple different things you have to remember. First of all, you have to target suspended bass when those fish are suspended. Now, most of the time, bass are going to suspend to some extent, with the exception of in and around the spawn. It's like not all the fish are going to spawn but at the same time, but really about the only time of year that you don't have a significant amount of suspension in a lake is when that water temperature is close to 60 degrees. A lot of those fish are spawning, getting ready to spawn. They're moving shallow, not as many fish out deep with that. The other factor that keeps suspended fish down is dirty water. Fish will not suspend in dirty water as much as they will in water visibilities that have a little bit more clarity in it. Doesn't have to be clear, but you're not going to have a lot of suspended fish if you have 6 inches of visibility in a lake. And not to say they don't, because there's probably some that do, but for the most part, those fish are going to be shallow, more target oriented. So from that standpoint, the months of between, like, say May through February, on the cleaner water lakes, where you're going to have the predominant suspension in a lake. Another thing that will increase suspension levels in a lake is if you have a lake that has a lot of spotted bass. Spotted bass love to suspend. So do smallmouth sometimes. Largemouth quite not so much. They still do suspend, but they will not suspend the same way in shape or form as the spotted bass and smallmouth do. Most of the time, largemouth will suspend a little bit shallower. Now, given that, when you're talking in terms of fishing for suspended fish, don't think that bass, when you have this perception in your mind of bass suspending, don't think that they're out there suspending like over deep water all the time, because they suspend a lot in shallow water. I have caught a ton of fish in standing timber, say the timber was like, 10 or 15 feet deep, and these fish will be suspended 3 to 5 feet underneath that suspended timber or down the sides of the suspended timber. If you have water visibility that's less than, say, 3 feet, for the most part, those fish will be suspended shallower. So they can be closer to the bank suspended. They can be suspended off the end of a boat dock. They can be suspended around a bridge pier. They can be suspended around the outside of a lay-down tree. A lot of different type of areas they can be suspended. They can suspend in the back of the cove. I've seen a lot of fish that get in the back of a cove in 10 foot of water and will suspend just a couple feet under the surface. So you have to sort of retrain your mind to think that you're not, when you're fishing for suspended fish, you're not fishing for these fish out in the middle of open water with that. Okay, now that being said, there are two situations where, or actually three situations where fish do suspend in bigger groups and more frequently. First one is a main lake point, main lake or secondary point. Points, main lake, secondary points are top areas for bass to suspend on. They like to get out on the ends and sides of those points, depending upon how deep and clear the water is, and suspend out there. The second with that is ditches. Bass love to suspend in the middle of coves or the middle of ditches on any lake across the country if you have clear water. And that's just, you sort of use those ditches as highways and they'll suspend along the way. And the third factor is around any type of submergent timber. So if you have a lake that has a lot of deep, broken off timber, like say for example, Lake Lanier in Georgia, some of the Ozark lakes we have around here, even lakes like Lake Seminole in Georgia, bass love to suspend in and around the tops of submergent timber. Those are the three things that they really, really like to do, with the exception of those fish that are just suspending out completely in open water that guys are live scoping. I'm talking about fish you can target with traditional electronics. So one of the things you can do with that is when you're looking for suspended fish, or you suspect there's some suspended fish to be caught, don't necessarily look for the fish per se, the bass per se. If you have traditional electronics like 2D sonar or even down imaging, what is more important is the bait fish. The bait fish depth that that you see on your electronics is going to give you a good indication if there's any fish suspended down there. A lot of times on traditional sonar, you can pick up a big school of shad pretty easy on 2D sonar, but you can't really see if there's any fish around them. It'll just look like a big yellow blob, and those those fish can be right there mixed with them. So pay attention to where the bait fish is at, and that's going to give you an indication of how deep you need to fish for suspended. I've seen sometimes those, there'll be shad, 45 foot deep in 60 foot of water, and I've seen other times where you're in 20 foot of water and the shad are 5 feet under the water. But once you get some consistency within the depth that the shad are that you're seeing, that gives you a good indication of how to target those fish. Now, there's two different ways that I like to catch suspended fish. One is either with a vertical jigging presentation. If I can get right over those fish, like a spoon or a blade bait's really good. But more often than not, my two favorite lures are jerk bait and a small swim bait. Once I figure out the depth that those shad are at, I can fan cast those areas with both those two lures and usually pick up a few with that. So anyway, guys, that's just a quick little analysis of suspended fishing, traditional in the traditional sense of the form. It's not my favorite way to catch them, to be honest with you guys. I would prefer to bring those fish up off the bottom or around targets, but that is how I go about fishing them, when I do look for them. So hope it helps out. We'll talk later.